Hello dear friends, and thank you for joining me. Having you here means a lot to me. Today I'm creating an art journal page with Halloween trick-or-treaters and an abundance of details. I have this idea of a door that opens, revealing trick-or-treaters behind it. I have a template of a door and I trace it onto a page I ripped out of my big dilutions journal. The next step is cutting that door so it opens, and I use a sharp blade to do it with my new Fiskars craft knife. I fold the doors open and use painter's tape to reinforce the hinges so the doors won't fall off. I can use the tape because I know I will cover it up with a couple of layers. So here I have masked off the door with post-it notes, and I use dilutions paint in slate grey to paint everything that isn't the door. Next, I have this brick stencil bought on second hand, and I should have used another one because this stencil is far too flimsy. I use Nuvo's black crackle paste to push through the stencil, and it being so flimsy means I don't get a perfect stenciling, but instead I can show you how to fix it. To fix it, I use a wet brush while the paste is still wet and take away the paste that bled through. Let me just admit that I wasn't very happy with the bricks, but I trust that it will be okay and continue forward. Next, I have these distress wood grain paper and dilution spray inks in melted chocolate, ground coffee and slate grey. I spray with water and then the inks. I put more wood grain paper over the ones sprayed with ink, and when the ink hasn't covered a whole panel, I spray it with more water to spread the ink, and now and again I add small spritzes of ink so every panel has its own look like old wood. And I continue to dab the panels with less ink onto the other ones, picking up leftover ink. The next thing I do is to use polymer clay in silver to make itty bitty nail heads for the door. I also make 2 doorknobs and I bake them in the oven and leave them to cool off. My wood panels are dry and I use my guillotine trimmer to make wood strips, and I make many. When I have a pile of wood strips, I use archival black soot ink to go around every strip of wood and darken the edges so every strip stand out on their own. It's now time to use the wood strips to make a door. I glue the strips onto the door on both sides to achieve an old wood door. And if I have to cut a strip, I use archival black soot to darken the edge before I glue on more strips. It takes a while to make the door, but it is not hard, more like an easy puzzle to put together. Next, I need an inky background to be seen through the door, and I use Distress Oxide inks in black soot, wilted violet, candied apple, squeezed lemonade, and twisted citron, and I find a blank page in my art journal. The yellow squeezed lemonade is used to transition the green to the red. Green and red makes brown, but yellow works with both colors, so I blend it in between the green and the red, and as usual, I go back and forth between the colors to achieve a smooth blend. To deepen the red, I bring in the dark red aged mahogany and blend it in the middle of the red candied apple. Next, I use the purple wilted violet before I finish my blend with black soot, and I pull that black down on the sides for a colorful evening sky. Before I'm done blending, I hold the door over the sky to see how far down I want the black. Next, I want some splatters, and I use Distress paint in black soot on an acrylic block, and I use a brush to flick black splatters onto my sky. It's time to glue that brick wall and the door to my sky, and I need a strong glue, so I use Distress Collage Medium, and I use clips to hold it in place while the glue dries. Next, I'm using those nail heads I made a while ago. They are baked and have cooled down, and now they will finish my door. Distress Collage Medium doesn't just glue paper, but plastic, metal, and thankfully polymer clay. I dab the collage medium where I want my nail heads, and I do the same for the door knobs. I dab on the glue and place the door knobs in the glue and let it dry. Next, I need coffee, and then I'm ready to stamp. First, I'm using Tim Holtz Snarky Cat's Halloween stamps that my friend Linda gave me. I choose the broom, the hat, and the bat, and I'm heat embossing them using Wow's Ebony Superfine Embossing Powder. I stamp in VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink, and I cover with that black embossing powder and use my heat tool to melt it. Next, I have the Oddball Halloween stamps from Stamping Bella. They are just so funny. I stamp them in VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink, which is waterproof and won't smudge. After stamping, I realized that I don't want my trick-or-treaters floating behind the door, so I use the leftover wood strips to give them something to stand on. So, let's drink some coffee and color my images in Distress inks. First up are the broomstick, hat, and the bat. For the hat, I used the dark purple Dusty Concord. For the broomstick, I used gathered twigs and some antique linen for the fabric at the top of the broomstick. I use black soot for the ribbon on the hat, and then I move on to the oddballs. Starting with the ghost and his eyelids, I use my Prima watercolor palette called Complexions. To give that white ghost some depth, I use the greyish blue weathered wood. I use it wherever I want shadows, like the creases at the bottom, around the candy, and under his eyes. Next, I'm coloring his shoes in black soot. And I color the candy in many bright colors, like yellow and orange for the candy corn and pink, red and purple for the other candy. Next is that amazing pile of pumpkins, and I use carved pumpkin, wild honey and rusty hinge for the bottom pumpkin. I cover the whole pumpkin in carved pumpkin and use the darker oranges to add shadow, leaving a highlight in the middle. I want the middle pumpkin to be darker, so I bring in a dark red and a brown, and then I cover the whole pumpkin in the darker wild honey and add shadows with rusty hinge and the brown. For the last little cute pumpkin, I go lighter with a yellow mustard seed as a base coat and add shadows with carved pumpkin and wild honey. For the leaves on the pumpkin, I use a distress watercolor marker in Twisted Citron and the darker Rustic Wilderness, a combo I love. Moving on to the vampire girl, I use carved pumpkin and wild honey for her pumpkin bucket. Then I bring in picked raspberries, wilted violet and black soot for her outfit. Starting with picked raspberries, I put it around the edges of her dress and blend it all out with water in the middle. I paint her gloves with purple and her shoes with pink again. I color her whole hair in wilted violet, marking the curls with undiluted ink and filling in the hair with ink diluted with water. Her wings get a coat of black soot, and for her vampire skin I use weathered wood to achieve a bluish-white skin tone. Last but not least, I color the skeleton and I leave the bones white and use a black marker to fill in the black, since the area is so small. For his eyelids I use the same Prima watercolor palette as I used on the ghost. And for his skull I use black soot to add some shadow. I color the letters on his sign in picked raspberries, and the sign is colored with gathered twigs. Before I put this page together, I feel I need some wood on the inside of the door, so I do the same as before and use leftover wood strips to make the beginning of a floor. Then I start gluing my images on the page, starting with the bat, then the broom and the hat on the inside of the door. Then I glue down the pumpkin tower, the skeleton, the ghost, and the vampire. Here is the whole page all finished, and I want to thank you for following along and supporting this channel. I hope you will be back soon for more. Until the next time, happy Halloween!